Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dave Crouch. This is Policy Talks, and it's a special edition. The show is produced by the Williamson Inc., our county chamber of commerce in Williamson County, and we're doing it virtually again today. The special edition is specifically to get to know a little bit more about the coronavirus, the COVID-19 effects on our state, and how we are reopening the state. I should have welcomed our guest from WCTV Channel 3 at WAKM 950. So welcome, audience. Our special guest this morning is Tennessee Senator Jack Johnson. He represents Williamson County, which is the 23rd district. He also is the majority leader in our state Senate. And the more relevant assignment he's got right now that we want to find out more about is he's a member of Governor Lee's Economic Recovery Group. Jack, tell us what the Economic Recovery Group is and who's on it and what your purpose is.
Sure, Dave. Good morning, everyone. Good to be back with you, and appreciate everyone taking some time to join us to find out what all is going on, not only in Williamson County, but across the state in relative to our efforts to mitigate the COVID-19 outbreak, as well as try to get our economy back going again. I know everyone is anxious to do that. The Economic Recovery Group was a task force effectively that was set up by Governor Lee and his staff to bring in business leaders from across the state and healthcare experts to provide guidance on how businesses can safely reopen. When I say safely, that means to protect the employees of the business as well as customers who may be patronizing those businesses. And when I say business leaders from across the state, that's exactly what I mean. Representatives from the Retail Association, the Hospital Association, just about every area of the economy that you can think of. Because when you think about our economy and how diverse it is, obviously different businesses have different needs. And especially in this new world of dealing with COVID-19 and providing proper safety precautions, every business is going to be a little bit different. One example is restaurants, which opened up this week on Monday at 50% capacity. They certainly have a different scenario, different situation in terms of customer-employee interactions when you're talking about waitresses and hostesses and waiters and that type of thing, and how you seat customers in the restaurant and that type of guidance. That's going to be different than, say, a large office building in Cool Springs, where there's very little customer interaction, but you do have a lot of employees. And so how can you safely get those people back in the workforce? So this group has worked very, very quickly, because it was just set up a couple of weeks ago by Governor Lee. And so there have been many, many meetings, many hours of discussions with healthcare officials and business leaders on how best these businesses can open. And so if you've been following Governor Lee's press conferences and his executive orders that have been issued, you know that we are doing a gradual reopening of the economy, both in terms of the types of businesses that can open, the capacity at which they can open, and then the safety precautions that they need to use in order to open. So restaurants opened on Monday at 50% capacity, and they have a certain set of guidelines. Small retail opened up on Wednesday. When I say opened up, that means they're permitted to open up. No one is forced to open up. If it's a business owner that doesn't want to or doesn't feel safe in opening, that they're not mandated to open, but they're allowed to open. And today, Friday, elective medical procedures can resume, which is important. Today also, gyms can open up, and we can go through some of the various safety guidance that apply to these different industries. And on Wednesday of next week, your close contact type businesses, that's hair salons, barber shops, nail salons, will be able to open up as well. We're also dentists. That's another important sector of the economy. People need to see their dentist, get their teeth cleaned. If you've got nothing worse than having a sore tooth, if you need it fixed, you need to be able to get it fixed. So they'll be able to open up next week as well. So it's a comprehensive group with a lot of work going on, but a lot of good work. And last thing I'll say on that, Dave, is we want people to be safe when they're in the economy, when they're patronizing businesses, but we also want them to have a degree of confidence. We want Tennesseans to know that, hey, this is not willy-nilly, we're just opening the doors, just go in just like things were before the outbreak. Things are different, and they'll need to be different for some time, but we believe that most businesses can operate safely. People can get back to work if they follow these guidelines.
Now, we've heard in the news about the severe problem that some of the nursing homes and assisted living facilities are having, and so that's an obvious place where we need to be extra cautious about how to deal with those kind of facilities. Are there any other areas, any other businesses that have been a particular problem as far as tracking the virus and where it came from, Jack?
Yeah. So with your long-term care facilities, that's an excellent point. And in fact, I hope that most of the people watching were able to see our governor standing side by side with the President of the United States in Washington at the White House yesterday. Governor Lee made an appearance with President Trump at the White House during his press conference yesterday. And they were talking specifically about the vulnerable population. And this is something you're going to hear a lot about in the coming weeks and months, is protecting. One of the things we know about this virus, according to the healthcare experts, is that it is a greater risk to those who are older and those who have underlying health conditions. So when you talk about a long-term care facility, that can be a recipe for disaster there, because obviously the residents there are going to skew older and be more susceptible to healthcare issues. And in fact, if you look at states like New York that have been hit really hard by this virus, a significant number of the cases that have affected New York and other densely populated areas are in nursing homes. They're in those long-term care facilities. So when you look at the White House guidance under Opening America, you can view that at whitehouse.gov/Opening America. And you'll see the 3-phase approach to opening up economies. And that's dictated by number of cases, case rate, hospitalizations, fatality rate, number of tests that are performed, but more importantly, of those tests that are performed, how many of them are positive. And one of the last things, unfortunately, and we hate it for our loved ones that are in long-term care facilities, but one of the last areas that will be opened up will be those long-term care facilities. Other than that, outside of that, where you've got people that are in close proximity in a long-term care facility, and they're the vulnerable population. So that's an area of specific concern and something we're going to have to watch very, very closely. Other than that, our concerns are obviously your close contact type businesses. What we know about this virus is if you can stay 6 feet away from someone or from other people, you enhance your safety significantly, and your risk of contracting the virus goes down significantly. It's hard to get your hair cut or to get your fingernails done with someone who's 6 feet away from you. So that's why we refer to those as close contact businesses. And so that's an area we want to get them open, and we're going to next week, but we have to make sure that they have PPE, the personal protective equipment. If you go to get your hair cut or your nails done, you're probably going to be asked to wear a mask, and the person who is performing those services will be wearing a mask and perhaps even a gown and gloves.
I was wondering about that. I noticed that in the guidelines, and I don't know if she can do a good job cutting hair with a mask around my head. I'll have to see that to understand how that's going to work. But
yeah, we'll have to get creative about it.
No one needs a haircut worse than I do right now, but looking forward to that. Jack, you've got a lot of information on how this virus is affecting the state. Let's circle back and look at that just a minute. and tell us, as part of the economic recovery group, what information you're seeing as far as how it's affecting our state, both from a personal health standpoint as well as an economic standpoint.
Sure, be glad to. And I do have a couple of slides I'll share with you here, Dave. And I'm trying to get better about this Zoom stuff here, so I beg everyone's patience. The one I wanted to show you here, are you able to see this, Dave?
It looks good, Jack, yes.
Okay, great. So this kind of gives you an overview here statewide of where we are as a state, some critical information. You see here that our total confirmed cases, 10,735. We've had 199 fatalities. By the way, this information is current as of 3 p.m. yesterday. Had just over 1,000 hospitalizations. Roughly 50% of the people documented cases that we know of that have tested positive that we've tracked have recovered. And so that's a good figure there. And hopefully that number will continue to climb, not only in terms of the raw number, but as a percentage of the total cases there.
Right.
Tennessee, and if you saw Governor Lee yesterday in Washington with the president, Tennessee really has been a leader, in terms of testing. We have performed 177,000 tests. Of that, 10,735, as I mentioned earlier, have tested positive. Almost 167,000 of those have tested negative. Now, this whole issue about the economy and the stay-at-home orders was all about flattening the curve, and that's important because of our hospital capacity. We wanted to make sure for those serious cases we had adequate hospital capacity, and you can see 31% of our hospital beds are available now. We've got 572 out of almost 2,000 ICU beds that are available as well, and our ventilator capacity is in really good shape. This statewide map is interesting to me because it shows the cases by county, and the dark purple are where you have the highest number of cases. Now, this is not as a percentage of overall population. These are raw numbers. Obviously, you see Shelby County with over 2,500, Davidson County over 2,600 cases. Those are the highest number of cases. Stands to reason. You've got the most people there, the highest population. Williamson County is in the dark purple. We're one of the higher number of case rates at 411 cases. Mm-hmm. That's more than Hamilton County or Knox County, which have greater populations, but still pretty high for Williamson County. So, and obviously the areas shaded in the lighter, whiter colors are the fewer, and they're going to be the smaller populations, more rural type counties. Now, another slide I want to show you, Dave, is, and bear with me here, I'm going to need to scroll this down. This gives you an idea of kind of the impact, as you said, and you phrased it perfectly. When we think about COVID-19 and the effect on Tennessee, we think about it in two ways. First and foremost is the medical side, the health and safety of Tennesseans, and the number of cases, do we have adequate hospital capacity, and so forth. But we also have to think about the economic impact, and to say it's been devastating is not an overstatement. It has been devastating to our economy, and that's why it's important that we get our economy open back up. So we've had 413,000 unemployment claims since March 1st, which is by any metric historic. It's just off the charts in terms of the number of unemployment claims. We estimate right now that our unemployment rate is somewhere between 15 and 20% in the state of Tennessee. We've had 15% of all Tennessee workers that have filed unemployment. And again, these numbers are estimates. As the data comes in, sales tax collections and so forth, we'll be able to nail these down more. But the estimate right now is $870 million in net sales to Tennessee retailers, which is staggering. And 53% fewer new business applications. The big number here at the bottom is the loss to our Tennessee GDP, our gross domestic product. We estimate to be at $5 billion. And we'll talk probably in a moment, I'm sure, about the General Assembly and our state budget and what we will be doing when we resume our legislative session on June 1st. But we are estimating the impact to our state sales tax collections, revenue collections. Well, it's F&E, franchise and excise tax collections too, because they'll be down somewhere between 700 billion and 1.5 billion between the current fiscal year and projections into the next fiscal year. So no other way to say it, Dave, but it's pretty bad.
It nothing that we've seen in my lifetime, certainly, and it's staggering to see those numbers. Obviously, it's very important to get the state back to work, and the reopening schedule. Let's talk about that a little bit and how it's staged. The restaurants this past Monday were able to go back to work 50% capacity, and that's 50%, I think, of the fire marshal's approved capacity. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, that's how you. Most every business that's open to the public has some type of fire marshal capacity that's publicly displayed, or certainly the business owner will know what that number is, and so that's how they can formulate and arrive at the 50% number.
And all the employees are wearing masks of some type, and but the customers there do not have to wear masks. I take it. So.
That's right, and I've got the guidance here. We can go into specifics if you want, but generally speaking, you should see tables 6 feet apart. You should see no more than 6 people at any given table. It might be a little unusual when you go into a restaurant. When you sit down, there should not be a ketchup bottle or salt and pepper shakers or any type of condiments there that people touch. You can get those, but the restaurant will bring those to you after they've been wiped down and sanitized after the last use. So those are the types of things that are going to be what we kind of refer to as the new normal for a while. No buffets kind of stands to reason with that. Your waiting areas, if it's a popular restaurant, they're not going to allow you to congregate. I know you've probably been there too, and you're standing in the little alcove there waiting for them to call your name for your table, and it's very crowded. So people are going to need to disperse, and if you're waiting on a table, it'll probably be outside, and you need to be at least 6 feet away from anyone else.
All right. Now, retailers, you mentioned, you said small retailers went back to work on Wednesday. What does that not include, and what does it include?
Yeah, and I don't know if that I should have said small. As most people know, your larger box stores, Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, those types of stores have been open. They were deemed as essential. So I think of the mom and pop businesses. Those are the ones who have been hit so hard by this. Right. But it's a fair point. I think you saw where, and I don't remember the exact date. I think Cool Springs Galleria will be reopening. That's not a small store, but it's been closed, and so it can reopen as well. But no disrespect to the larger companies. It's just I've heard from so many, and I know how hard this has hit our businesses. So I'm just really excited to see them get open back up.
I know my wife Tammy has already made 2 trips to Hobby Lobby since on Wednesday and Thursday both, so she's excited, and I know the businesses themselves are excited to be able to start bringing some revenue back in, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, and today the elective surgeries, the gyms, the fitness centers, the help me out. What else is happening as of today?
That pretty much covers it for today, and then next week on the 6th, which I believe is Wednesday, is when the close contact businesses can open, and that's hair salons, barber shops, nail salons. Those types of businesses will be next week, and the guidance for those was released yesterday. We've got that. It's available on the state website. And so that's what's kind of dictating this process. And again, it may seem a little bit confusing, but the purpose of the Economic Recovery Group was to formulate that guidance. We want consistent, clear guidance for those employers and those businesses that are opening back up. So what you've kind of seen, it's come in phases, is the guidance will be released, as was yesterday, for those close contact businesses, because they need to prepare, right? They need to make sure that they have whatever they're going to need in terms of PPE or other materials, make sure they have their processes in place. One thing you'll see in the guidance when you look at it is that every business needs to have what they refer to as kind of a COVID-19 coordinator, someone who's responsible at that place of business for making sure that the guidance is being adhered to. And that's, again, cleaning high touch areas, wiping things down, disinfecting, and then making sure that PPE is used as necessary.
Basically policing and making sure the business is following the rules.
Exactly.
That makes sense. And then next Wednesday, the barbershops, salons, and as you put it, high touch businesses. What I haven't heard mentioned on a schedule of any kind are the entertainment venues, the bowling alleys, the sporting event venues, theaters, auditoriums, certainly amusement parks, things like that. Do we have an idea of what has to happen before they can reopen, Jack?
Yeah. So, interestingly, that the Economic Recovery Group, the ERG, is being headed by Mark Ezell, who is Commissioner of Tourist Development for the state. So it's certainly something that's very dear to his heart. Tourism is such an important part of our economy, our industry, and it is amusement parks, it's museums, it's tourist attractions, things like that. Everything from Dollywood in East Tennessee to Graceland and Memphis.
The Williamson County Fair, I might add.
Williamson County Fair, the Grand Ole Opry. I mean, it's a huge part of our economy. Those are the most difficult areas to come up with the guidance. I mean, how do you open a Dollywood and or a Grand Ole Opry and keep people 6 feet apart? You can't have 4,000 people go to the Grand Ole Opry probably and have some hand out a mask to everyone who goes in. So those will get open, and they're certainly a priority. The ERG and people who represent those types of industries are part of the ERG. They're part of the smaller working groups that are working hard to come up with how do you do it and what's needed in order to do it. And then the other critical part of that is are we continuing to flatten the curve? Are the number of cases continuing to go down?
Right.
And then ultimately, of course, we know that our pharmaceutical industry is working hard on treatments and ultimately a vaccine. And so we will get there. But those, unfortunately, those types of businesses where you have large numbers of people, be it sporting events, concerts, amusement parks, things like that, they're going to be the most difficult, but we certainly recognize how important they are to our economy. And so we want to get them open.
One thing that hasn't been mentioned, and I did see a note about it in the Tennessean, but the worship churches, places of worship, things like that. According to what I read, they actually have not ever been actually told to stop meeting it, but I thought they had. Now, clear that up for me, if you will.
Yeah. So good news is on churches, worship, places of worship, is you're going to see today some guidance come out, and actually they were under the order to meet remotely or to do it virtually to hold their services. Good news is there will be some guidance that will come out today, and churches will be allowed to resume in-person worship services this weekend, actually. But it will be with some pretty strict guidance in terms of socially distancing and that type of thing. And I know it's I've gotten lots of calls. I miss going to church. It's an important part of our existence, and we love to get together and congregate and worship together. And so it'll be good to get those churches open back up. So you'll see more about that today. Governor will have a press conference this afternoon and release guidance on worship services today. So a little breaking news there.
Right. Good. Just an FYI, I did also see in the paper this morning that Disney is obviously, for obvious reasons, is going to great lengths to come up with safety procedures to handle at their theme parks. So that'll be an interesting process to watch, because we know they will be extra cautious at trying to make sure their parks are safe, and we can kind of observe what they do and possibly learn some lessons from them. Business liability issues. Jack, you work for Tackle. Your employees or your I guess contractors go into people's homes in many cases. How are y'all dealing with the possibility of going back to work, and how do you expect that to work? What are you watching as far as business liability? And
sure.
so
Well, from the state standpoint, it's a very important issue. And in fact, there was a link. We had an ERG meeting call yesterday, and there was significant conversation about liability protection. And groups like NFIB, National Federation of Independent Businesses, Tennessee Chamber, which Williamson Inc. is a part of, and other business-related groups are certainly concerned about that, because if they're adhering to the guidance, if they're doing everything properly and safely according to the governor's executive orders and what the ERG has come down with, they should have some degree of protection from frivolous lawsuits, right?
Yep.
And it's this tort reform kind of conversation that we have a lot and have had over many years about, certainly protecting someone's right to sue if they are legitimately aggrieved and someone is not following either the law or the guidance and so forth. But at the same time, preventing unnecessary frivolous lawsuits, which can be devastating and financially and otherwise very expensive to businesses, small and large. So I don't have an answer for you as to what will be done, other than to say that conversation is taking place. I don't think you'll see blanket immunity across the board relative to COVID, because again, it's important that these businesses understand the importance of these safety guidelines. And it's important that the consumers understand those guidelines as well. Mm-hmm. If you show up to a restaurant and you go in and the tables are crammed together and people are on top of one another, the wait staff is not wearing PPE, and you see condiments on the table, well, they're not adhering to the guidelines, right? And so certainly we need accountability, but at the same time, anyone who's owned and operated a business, and I have, you do worry about that liability and that protection. And because you want to do everything right, you want to adhere to those guidelines, and you're trying very hard to do so. And if something happens, you want to know that you're not going to be getting sued, frivolously. And so we resume on June 1st with our legislative session. Committees will start the week prior to that. And so I think that conversation will take place. And we are talking about it both in the ERG, with the governor's office, and among legislative leaders as well.
You mentioned legislative leaders, and you are now your legislative assistants will be going back to work Monday, and again under very strict sanitary guidelines at the state capitol. Specifically, the Cordell Hall building, I think, is where most of your offices are. Tell us a little bit about what is going to be happening there with your staffs, and when the Senate and the House will be going back to work, how that will stage out over the next month or so.
Sure. Well, just to remind everyone, so we started our legislative session as we always do in January on the second Tuesday, and we got off to a great start and a robust agenda, and our finances are in excellent shape. And the governor proposed a great budget, which as majority leader, I'm the sponsor of that budget. And so we had a lot of great things in the works for Tennessee. And then this happened. And so we had to literally stop in our tracks and recognize that that we needed to go home. We we're in violation of CDC guidelines just by being in session, and so we stopped everything and turned and focused on getting a budget passed, because that's the only constitutional responsibility we have, is to pass a budget, a balanced budget for the state. Our fiscal year ends on June 30. And so July 1, we need a new budget in place or the government can't function. So we spent about a week there. We took the budget that the governor had proposed in early February, pretty much threw it out the window, started over, and passed a budget that assumed no revenue growth. We had assumed about 3.5% revenue growth for the coming fiscal year. And we knew that this, if we're going to have to shut businesses down, this is obviously going to impact our revenue collections. So we stripped everything out of that budget, passed a zero growth budget, basically just taking what we collected last year and assuming that for the coming year.
Right.
And we got that passed, so at least government could continue to function. Mm-hmm. And we recessed until June 1st. And we didn't really know how long this was going to be. We kind of picked that date, but I think it's going to work out pretty well. So we reconvene on June 1st in chamber. So that's the House will meet in full floor session, and Senate will as well. So what we've decided to do is we're going to come in the week prior, just after Memorial Day. Memorial Day is on the 25th, that Monday. So on Tuesday, the 26th, prior to the June 1st reconvening in chamber, committees are going to start to meet. We are going to exercise extreme precaution. Our facilities management teams at the Capitol and the Cordell Hall building are working to make sure they can keep things disinfected. We'll have access to PPE in committees. We can space out. We've got room to make sure we're socially distancing there as to the best degree possible. So we'll be able to come in and resume. You mentioned our staff members are starting back in the office on Monday, again, under strict protocols in terms of staying apart from one another and avoiding high congregated areas and disinfecting everything. It's important because there's a lot of work that goes into getting just ready for committees and legislative session. And we do this every year, but the work starts well in advance of us actually getting together in committee and on the floor. So our highest priority will be dealing with the budget. Unfortunately, that zero growth rate budget that we did pass for the coming fiscal year, I'm afraid is going to have to be cut further. And so, as I mentioned earlier, our estimates are now in terms of revenue shortfalls are anywhere from around 700 million to about 1.5 billion. And I'm getting into the weeds here, but we not only have to address the coming fiscal year budget, but the budget year that we're in right now has to balance. And we base our budget on projected revenues. Well, we didn't project a COVID-19 outbreak. And so the fourth quarter of our current fiscal year, which is April, May, June, that's when this is all hitting, and our economy shut down. So we're gonna have a shortfall in our current fiscal year, as well as have to make cuts for the coming fiscal year and our projected revenues there. So there's a lot of work to be done just dealing with the budget. Tennessee, our Constitution requires we have a balanced budget, and we will do that. The good news is, Dave, though, we came into this in the best economic condition we've ever been in. So we do have reserves. We have very little debt. So unlike states like New York, New Jersey, Illinois, that we're in bad shape really coming into this, and then this happens. So they're really in a bad spot. Tennessee was in a really good spot coming into this, so we'll be able to get through it.
The rainy day fund, as I recall, is of $700-800 million. That's going to go pretty quick, though.
Yeah, actually, we're at 1.45 billion in the rainy day fund. So. Okay. Yeah, we were at 1.1 billion through this current fiscal year, and we were going to put more money in. Had COVID-19 not happened, we were going to continue to build up that rainy day fund. We had reserves from the last fiscal year of around 350 million. When we passed that zero growth budget before we recessed, we took that 350 million and just socked it into the rainy day fund as well. So that got us to 1.45 billion. And there's some other reserves. There's TennCare reserves, which we have a good bit in TennCare reserves, and there's some other smaller reserve accounts. But we'll see how this impacts this fourth quarter. But our sales tax collections are down precipitously, as might be imagined. So we might have to dip into those reserves a little bit to balance the current fiscal year, and then we'll make the cuts as necessary moving forward.
Any idea where those cuts will come from?
No. So we're already doing a number of things which are important. We've already implemented a hiring freeze. The governor has asked all agencies and departments across the board to stop spending, be very, very deliberative in terms of what you're spending money on. And so we call those reversions because they were budgeted an X amount of dollars to operate their department or their agency. And if they can come in under that, which we encourage them to do, unlike typically in government, they're actually incentivized to spend everything they had. We don't. We like agencies and departments to come in under budget, so we'll be able to recoup some of that money that had been budgeted to offset any shortfalls in the coming year. So everything will be on the table. It will have to be. That includes teacher raises, state employee raises. Good news is there's no discussion now of any furloughs or layoffs of state employees. All state employees, all teachers are being paid, and hopefully that will be able to continue. That'll be a top priority. But we had, even in our emergency budget, we had money in there for, they weren't huge raises, but we did have some money in there for raises for state employees and teachers. We will have to take a look at that. I'm not saying there will be no raise or there will be a raise. I'm not making any declarations. It's just those are the types of things that we'll have to take a real serious look at in order to make sure we keep a balanced budget.
One other thing that you may be looking at as you come back into session are the fall elections. Elections involve a lot of older folks as far as the poll workers, a lot of older folks voting. And is that going to look a lot different this fall when we have the presidential election and all the associated elections around that at the same time? What's that going to look like?
Yeah, great question. And it's bad enough that we had this and it's doing this to our economy, but let's just add into it, let's have an election as well, including a presidential election and our regular, every 2 years state primaries in August. And you're right. I think the average age of a poll worker in Tennessee is about 68. And so our Secretary of State and our Coordinator of Elections, our Secretary of State is Trey Hargett, our Coordinator of Elections is Mark Goins. They are on this. They are having frequent calls with members of the General Assembly and leadership, mapping out their strategy and their plan to make sure that what we don't want to have happen, Dave, is we don't want someone to be disenfranchised because they're sick or they're concerned about getting sick. We want everyone to be able to vote. I mean, that's just that's a core tenet of our country, and we want people to be able to exercise their right to vote. So things that are being considered are allowing the Secretary of State to recruit younger poll workers, folks that are not as predominantly in that vulnerable population. Our poll workers are very important to the process. Expanding the number of polling places so that you have fewer people in a given polling place. We already have a fairly robust early voting schedule. And so, I typically early vote. When I go, there's usually not that many people there. So you can kind of space that out over time, which is a good thing. Obviously, usage of PPE is going to be important at the polling places. But probably the most critical thing is going to be voting by mail and absentee ballots. Under current law, Tennessee is what is referred to as an excuse state, meaning you can get an absentee ballot or you can vote by mail, but it has to be for a specific reason. Either, and by the way, it's blanket over age 60. So if you're over age 60, you can vote by mail. You can. You don't need any other reason. If you're disabled, if you are ill, if you have some other reason that would preclude you from being able to go to the polling place, then you can also vote by mail. So we'll be looking at that. I want to be very clear though, we're not going to go to blanket anyone can vote by mail. Voting by mail has been proven to be ripe for potential fraud and abused, ballot harvesting, some things that have taken place in other states. And that gets a little political because some people on different sides have different ideas about that. We're going to try to strike that balance between making sure anyone who wants to vote can. If you have a reason that you can't get to a polling place, we will make sure we can accommodate you with an absentee ballot. So it's a big topic of conversation. I don't know at this point, and I don't think the Secretary of State would know definitively at this point, or the Coordinator of Elections, if we're going to need to address anything in statute. The Secretary of State, Coordinator of Elections, our local election officials, they have a lot of authority to be able to do things that are right for their community. So we'll be talking with them, working with them. The Secretary of State is talking frequently with all 95 counties and the local election administrators. In Williamson County, our own Chad Gray does a great job. We've got a great election commission in Williamson County, and I know they're on it. And if they identify any areas that we need to address in statute, we'll certainly take a look at those. But I'm glad you brought it up. Very important. And it's not just the November election. We have August primaries, our state primaries, and we have a U.S. Senate primary that will be on the ballot in August. So this is right around the corner. Early voting will be starting in July. So it's not too far away. So we need to be thinking about these things, and we will.
All right, just a few odds and ends that I want to ask you about, Jack. The cities like Nashville and Knoxville, Memphis have got different guidelines, but because they have their own health department. Just curious aside, I thought Williamson County had a health department as well. Is that just a division of the state health department, or?
Yeah, it gets a little murky, and I'm not sure I understand it altogether. We have a local health department, but and it may be run by the county, but it's still accountable to the state or something. So, okay. but for purposes of COVID-19, you're right. 89 counties. The 6 counties are Davidson, Shelby, Madison, Hamilton, and Sullivan. Did I leave one out? Anyway, the big 4, and then you throw in Madison County and Sullivan County in Upper East Tennessee. Right. So they are different. They are those 6. Although interestingly, a couple of those, I think Knox may be one of them, or maybe Sullivan, they have said that they are going to follow the other 89 counties, which they can certainly do. Right. But they are being governed differently than the other 89.
Now, fair disclosure here, been talking to Representative Sam Whitson a little bit. And good. He tells me that some of the businesses that are close to the county line with Davidson County are concerned that people that are not allowed to go to a restaurant in Davidson County are going to flood into Williamson County to go to our restaurants and our businesses here, and possibly bring the virus down with them. On the other side of the county line, the businesses up there are afraid that people get in the habit of coming down here, so they won't go back to the businesses in Davidson County when they are allowed to open. Is the governor considering any intervention there to take care of that? What advice do you have?
Well, it's a tough one because unfortunately we know the virus doesn't recognize county lines and municipal boundaries and that type of thing. We're not going to check IDs to come to a Williamson County restaurant to see if you live in Williamson County. So there probably will be some of that. my hope is that Nashville, and I'm sure a lot of folks in Williamson County are following Mayor Cooper's press briefings and what they're doing in Nashville. It is a different dynamic there. I'm sure you'll have some of that bleed over county lines, and people will be coming down. If you can't get a haircut in Nashville, you might drive down to Williams County or to Rutherford County or Sumner County to get your haircut or to go to a restaurant, and that will happen. I don't see any way to police that or stop that, and it, no doubt, there is some unfairness there that a business that could be 100 yards away, but they're on the other side of a county line, they can't open, and the one on the other side of the county line can. I don't know how you address that, but in terms of the people moving around patronizing businesses, well, in fact, that's what we want to happen, right? We want these businesses to open up and become successful again. But that's why this guidance, these safety guidelines are so important, because whether you're from Nashville or Chattanooga or Memphis, you come to a restaurant in Williamson County, the social distancing, the proper use of PPE, keeping things clean and wiped down, those are all so important to do. And hopefully before long, we'll have the whole state opened up, maybe at limited capacity, and that will be less of an issue. I can't tell you when Nashville will open up, but it will be later than Williamson and the other 89 counties, but hopefully not too much later. I know Mayor Cooper and the Metro Council really want to get those businesses opened as well.
Right. As far as the virus concerned, there's some legal lawsuits going on regarding the governor's voucher program that they're getting ready to roll out. Is the virus going to affect how that happens? Are there any speculation about how all that's going to turn out?
No, I've not had any conversations with the administration. I'm certainly aware of the lawsuits. By the way, the lawsuits were in place before COVID-19. I mean, that was already going to happen. So the lawsuits don't necessarily, or they weren't motivated by the COVID-19 outbreak, and I don't know that they would impact how they're decided. We're concerned about our schools. I mean, that's just, we've talked about the economy, we've talked about the healthcare impact. Well, there's an educational impact too, right? Because I mean, I've got 2 teenage kids in high school and 1 in college, and they just, bam, go home. And it's been some distance learning and some of that kind of thing, but certainly it's been disrupted. So, my first hope is that we can open schools in the fall, and whether it's using an ESA account or not using an ESA account, I think we've got a bigger issue about just making sure schools in general can open up. The governor has the authority in the original legislation that we passed to start utilizing ESAs in Davidson County and Shelby County. He can do that this coming year, or he can wait another year. The thing that's at question is if he does implement them this fall, do Nashville and Shelby get the backfill money that they were going to get under the legislation? And of course, that has to be appropriated. And that was in the original budget. So the conversation about whether or not to implement ESAs, well, that's already done. It's just, do they get the money to replace the state funding for the kids that leave to go to a private school? So we'll have that conversation. I don't want to speak for the governor, what his intentions are. Does he intend to move forward with it this fall or not? I know he planned to before the COVID outbreak. He's got a lot on his plate, so I'm not sure where that one's going to fall.
Right. Local municipalities are going to have some of the same, or will have the same budget shortfalls that the state's dealing with. And I'm a little bit fuzzy about the federal aid, the state aid that might be flowing to the cities and counties. Can you shed a little light on that?
Yeah. So the state will be receiving quite significant amounts of money from the federal government. At last count, I think it was $2.3 billion, but it's specifically for COVID mitigation. One of the key areas that we're concerned about, our business community is concerned about, is our unemployment trust fund. So just so your viewers understand is, if you own a business and you employ people, you have to provide workers' compensation insurance for those employees, and you also have to pay into the unemployment compensation trust fund. And that's a trust fund that the state runs and manages, and it's a fairly large amount of money that is there to pay unemployment claims for people who lose their job. And it's through no fault of their own. If you're caught stealing from your company and you get fired, well, you're not eligible for unemployment compensation. But if you get fired for no fault of your own, then you're eligible for unemployment. Well, what's happened to this trust fund? Well, obviously it has been decimated, or it is being decimated because of the slide I showed you earlier about the over 400,000 unemployment claims. It's a staggering number.
Right.
And the way the trust fund works is once the balance drops down to a certain level, then the amount that employers have to pay into the trust fund starts to go up, because we want to make sure we have an adequate amount of money in there. So under current law, with our trust fund having been decimated with all these unemployment claims and money's going out like crazy, that balance is dropping. Well, under law, that's going to trigger an increase in what employers have to pay into the fund. The last thing in the world we want for these businesses that are struggling and trying to get open and keep their people employed is to give them a tax increase.
Right.
So we are looking and talking with the federal administration and the Trump administration to see and hopefully be able to utilize some of this federal money that we're receiving to replenish our unemployment compensation fund. There are other tools we have, and what we'll look at when we get back into session is possibly changing the law due to these extraordinary circumstances to perhaps delay those increases in premiums that these employers have to pay in, so that they don't get hit with that on top of everything else they're struggling with. That's one area where we're hoping to be able to use those federal funds. I think you're asking specifically about being able to for some of that money to go down to state and local governments. I mean, rather county and local governments. And I don't know what that's going to look like. We appropriated $200 million for direct assistance to local and county governments in our emergency budget. We may look at increasing that, but clearly our cities and counties are going to be struggling just like the state is. One distinction is, of course, we don't have a statewide property tax. And of course, local governments assessing property taxes, that revenue should remain, hopefully pretty consistent. They do rely on sales tax revenue to varying degrees, cities and counties do, and that's certainly going to be impacted. So it's a great question. And we're obviously, it's a partnership. We're going to work together and hopefully make our cities and counties get through this a little better.
Certainly a bigger problem for counties like cities and counties like Franklin and Brentwood and Williamson County, where there's a major retail base, and hopefully the smaller counties that don't depend as much on sales tax will be in a little better shape. The hospitals have taken a pretty bad hit because they haven't been able to do elective surgeries, and frankly, people have just been afraid to go to the hospitals for almost anything for fear of contacting someone with coronavirus. What is there any plans to try to make these hospitals whole? Any financial aid there?
Yeah, yes, there's conversations. I can't make any promises right now, both at the federal and the state level, similar to businesses that have been hurt by this through no fault of their own. I mean, it's like a business that was doing fine. The government comes in and tells you have to close your doors. So your business suffers not because you didn't run a good business or mismanagement. It's just they shut you down. Same thing with hospitals. And so I do think there will be some assistance for hospitals. We're looking at it from our Medicaid perspective. And again, don't know yet, but some of this federal money that's passing down might be able to be used through Medicaid to help hospitals and healthcare providers in general. We know that there's money in there to help for COVID related treatment. But what about the business that they just lost that like you were talking about? It has been devastating for them. And again, good news is that is resuming today with guidance and with guidelines. So things like colonoscopies, joint replacements, I don't really, I wouldn't consider a joint replacement necessarily to be elective if you're hurting and you need a joint replaced, but they did fall into that category. So I guess non-emergent care, but that is resuming today. So hopefully that will get back on pace, and people can get back to getting procedures done that they need to for quality of life, and to help those hospitals out.
Great, great. One more that I have heard from someone, and I can't remember where I picked up on this issue, but a lot of people are dealing, actually able to go back to work now, but their child care is not available, as I understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but child care centers are not available, or not able to go back to work right now. Any suggestions, any ways that you're seeing to mitigate those issues, pay for
Yeah.
them?
So yeah, it's a critical part of our economy, right? Because people depend on childcare to be able to go to work, and it's further impeded because the schools are closed.
Right.
Because a lot of folks work, their kids are at school, and not that school is childcare, but their kids are taken care of. And so with schools closed, that's put an incredible burden on that. Um, Again, guidance and safety precautions for those types of businesses are coming, and hopefully we'll be able to be opened up. I'm not going to speak for every business across the state, but as you know, on the CARES Act that was passed, and also the mandatory paid leave bill that was passed early on in this, when we started shutting businesses down, provided for paid leave, and one of the criteria was that you have kids at home and you don't have childcare. Because schools are closed. And so there is some accommodation there. That's going to be for your larger companies that are out there, not as much for the smaller mom and pops, because the mandatory paid leave bill only applied to companies with 50 or more employees. So for some of your larger companies, there's some help there. And by the way, I think that paid leave was not full salary, but maybe 2/3 or something for lacking childcare. But again, as we move through this, and hopefully with the guidance and the safety precautions, good news is we know what a blessing. If there's a silver lining in all this, it appears that this virus does not affect younger folks as much. There have been cases where younger folks have become very ill and even died from COVID. But by and large, our kiddos and our younger folks are less susceptible to severe implications from COVID-19. So that's good news. And I know that's being taken into consideration too, relative to childcare and also schools and church, summer camps, church activities with kids, those types of things. We want to keep our kids safe, but good news is they're less susceptible.
Believe it or not, that's all I had on my list, and we're about out of time, Jack. Certainly just thankful that we've got the Senate Majority Leader and a member of this economic recovery team right here in Williamson County and representing us, and appreciate the time that you've made available to help us understand all these issues that are so new and so different than anything we've ever had to deal with. Just tell me, I forgot to ask you earlier on, but where are you this morning?
Well, I'm actually doing some essential travel relative to my business in a very safe way. I'm traveling in my recreational vehicle, and so socially distancing and that type of thing. But I'm sitting in a Starbucks parking lot in Texarkana, Texas, at the moment. So, but we'll be back soon, and yeah, it's the new normal, right? We're doing it. Before we wrap up, Dave, let me say thank you for doing this and giving me the opportunity to give some insight that I have. But also want to thank the chamber, Matt and Kel, everybody They've done such a great job in terms of making resources available to people, information, and we've got a chamber that we can really be proud of, all the folks at Williamson Inc. And obviously our local folks too, great working relationship with Rogers Anderson, our county mayor, our city mayors, and it's a team effort. We're going through unprecedented times, but the good news is we're all pulling in the same direction. I'm available if anybody watching has questions about unemployment compensation claims, anything else. Don't hesitate to call me, contact my office. You can email me as well. We'll do our best to get you an answer and get your situation resolved. So really appreciate the opportunity to do this, Dave.
You're a great resource, Jack, and I'll just make a political statement here, but you're a great state senator, and we appreciate having you.
Well, thank you.
Thanks. I'll echo what Jack said. Our staff is incredible, and Kel McDowell and Griffin Wilcoxon have been on this show. Abby Bass is behind the scenes making sure the Zoom works, and Matt Largen is heading that team up and doing a great job. And Nancy Conway over there to feed me various bits of interesting information from out in the community. It's a team effort, and we appreciate them. Put in a plug here for Vanderbilt and AT&T. They do help in a financial way to make sure we can cover all the expenses that go into putting this on. Creed Henderson over at WCTV does an amazing job making us look good, and Tom Lawrence and WAKM, we really appreciate your getting us out into the community. Look forward to being back at the end of end of May with our full legislative delegation on the last Friday of the month. I'll double check that date. We'll publicize that closer to time, but look forward to having you back then, Jack, and along with the other members of our legislative delegation. Thank you very much. Y'all have a good day.